You wake up in the morning and something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The alarm blares, you hit snooze, and in those first few seconds of consciousness, before your eyes are even fully open, you feel an invisible weight pressing down on your chest. It's not physical pain, but a vague sense that something fundamental is missing, that you're living a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels strangely hollow within. You get up, go through the motions, fulfill your obligations, even manage a smile in social interactions, but behind that facade, there's a silent question that won't leave you. Is this all there is? This question follows you as you sip your coffee, as you sit in traffic, as you tackle tasks that should be satisfying, but feel curiously devoid of real meaning. You look around and see other people seemingly functioning just fine, and it makes you wonder if the problem is you, if you're too demanding, too sensitive, if you're looking for something that simply doesn't exist. At night, when you're finally alone with your thoughts, the feeling intensifies. You try to distract yourself with entertainment, with social media, with anything to fill the inner silence, but in the lulls between one distraction and the next, there it is again. This nagging awareness that you're wasting something precious, that you're living an existence that isn't truly yours, that you're following a script written by others, by societal expectations, by unexamined fears, by habits you've never really questioned. And the most frustrating part is, you've tried so many things to fill this void. Maybe you chased more professional achievements, thinking the next promotion would deliver the missing satisfaction. Maybe you invested in relationships, hoping someone else could complete what felt incomplete in you. Maybe you pursued pleasures, new experiences, external changes, always with the secret hope that finally something would click and you'd feel that sense of being truly alive, of being exactly where you were meant to be, doing exactly what you were meant to do. But none of it has worked long term, and here you are still carrying this existential burden that nobody around you seems to notice or understand. This experience you're having isn't weakness, it's not pessimism, it's not ingratitude for the life you have. It's something far deeper and far more important. It's your authentic self, crying out for a life with real meaning. It's your uniquely human dimension, refusing to accept a merely reactive, automated existence. And there's someone who not only deeply understood this existential pain, but who discovered, in the most unimaginable circumstances, the keys to transforming it into something extraordinary. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and neurologist, survived 4 Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, and emerged from that hellish experience not broken, but as a bearer of revolutionary insights into human nature and what truly matters for living a meaningful life. Through years of unspeakable suffering, deprived of absolutely everything except his bare consciousness, Frankl uncovered truths about what keeps us alive and motivated that defy almost everything traditional psychology has taught us. And one of Frankl's most unsettling discoveries was that there are certain patterns of behavior, certain mental attitudes, certain ways of relating to life that systematically push us away from meaning and trap us in existential emptiness. They are subtle saboteurs, socially accepted, often even encouraged by contemporary culture, but they act as a slow poison to our capacity for authentic living. Today we're going to explore 5 of these things that are sabotaging your life and that you need to urgently let go of if you truly want to experience the existential transformation Frankl demonstrated is possible even in the most adverse conditions. The first thing that's devastatingly sabotaging your life is the obsessive pursuit of happiness as the primary goal of existence. This might sound counterintuitive in an entire culture, built around the premise that we should chase happiness at all costs. But Frankl identified this direct pursuit of happiness as a major cause of modern existential emptiness. He observed that the more we make happiness our conscious objective, the more it eludes us. This happens because genuine happiness can't be pursued directly. It can only emerge as a byproduct of having dedicated ourselves to something we find meaningful. Frankl called this the self-transcendent nature of human existence. We only truly realize ourselves when we turn towards something beyond ourselves, when we serve a cause, deeply connect with another person, or create something of value. The contemporary obsession with happiness creates a vicious cycle. You wake up thinking about how you're going to be happy today. Plan activities that are supposed to bring happiness. Constantly monitor your emotional state to check if you're happy, and inevitably get frustrated when you realize happiness hasn't arrived as expected. This hyper-reflection on your own emotional state, this obsessive monitoring of whether or not you're happy, paradoxically ensures that you won't be. It's like trying to fall asleep by anxiously checking if you're already asleep. The very attempt sabotages the outcome. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed something fascinating. The people who survived with their mental sanity most intact weren't those desperately trying to stay happy or avoid suffering, but those who found meaning in their suffering, a purpose that transcended the immediate situation. He tells the story of an elderly man who was deeply depressed after the death of his beloved wife. Frankl asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had survived?" The man replied, "Oh, doctor, that would have been terrible for her. She would have suffered so much." Frankl then said, "See, by surviving her, you are sparing her that suffering. But now you must pay the price by surviving and mourning." Suddenly, the man's suffering gained meaning. It didn't disappear, but it acquired dignity and purpose. He wasn't suffering for no reason. He was sparing someone he loved from even greater pain. The pursuit of happiness as an end in itself is profoundly impoverishing, because it reduces human existence to mere management of pleasant emotional states. It creates a consumerist mindset towards life. I'm seeking what makes me happy right now, what gives me immediate pleasure, what satisfies my emotional needs. But a life built solely around the chase for happiness becomes shallow, self-centered, and paradoxically miserable. You've probably experienced this. Moments when you were obsessed with your own happiness were likely periods when you felt most empty and least fulfilled. Conversely, moments when you were genuinely absorbed in a meaningful project, helping someone in need, creating something that mattered, you probably forgot all about monitoring if you were happy, and in retrospect, realized you were deeply satisfied. The crucial difference is that true happiness emerges as an unintentional byproduct of a meaningful life. It cannot be manufactured through direct pursuit. Abandoning the obsessive chase for happiness doesn't mean accepting a miserable life. On the contrary, it means freeing yourself from the tyranny of happiness as a constant metric of existential success and opening yourself up to the possibility of a life rich in meaning, which will naturally produce deep and lasting satisfaction as a consequence. The second thing that's brutally sabotaging your life is the escape from inevitable suffering through constant distractions and emotional anesthetics. Our contemporary culture has developed a pathological aversion to suffering of any kind, creating the illusion that a good life is one without pain, without discomfort, without challenges that disturb us. This mindset is not only unrealistic, but fundamentally destructive to human growth. Frankl discovered that suffering, when it's unavoidable, can be transformed into human accomplishment through the attitude we adopt towards it. He didn't romanticize suffering. He didn't say we should seek it out or that it's good in itself. But he observed that a certain degree of suffering is absolutely inevitable in human life, and that our only real choice isn't whether we will suffer or not, but how we will respond to that suffering. The modern tragedy is that we've developed increasingly sophisticated mechanisms to flee from any psychological discomfort before we even have a chance to discover what that discomfort is trying to communicate to us. Feeling anxious? There's an app to distract you. Feeling sad? There's endless content to consume until you forget. Feeling an existential void? There are substances, superficial relationships, impulse purchases, anything to avoid confronting the fundamental question your psyche is trying to put in front of you. This constant flight from emotional discomfort creates an increasingly narrow and superficial life. It's like you're constantly running away from important conversations with yourself, refusing to listen to internal messengers, bringing uncomfortable but crucial news about your life. Frankl identified this as a form of logogenic neuroses, psychological problems that don't arise from repressed unconscious conflicts as Freud proposed, but from a lack of meaning, from unaddressed existential emptiness. The person who systematically flees from emotional discomfort through distractions is inadvertently creating the conditions for a much larger existential collapse in the future. It's like ignoring symptoms of a serious illness because they're uncomfortable to examine. Eventually, the untreated disease manifests much more severely. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that the people who broke down psychologically weren't necessarily those facing the worst physical conditions, but those who lost the capacity to find any meaning in their suffering. When suffering seemed completely without purpose, without meaning, without anything that could redeem it, it became unbearable. But when people could see their suffering as a sacrifice for something greater, as a test of their character, as a way to protect others, or simply as an opportunity to demonstrate human dignity in degrading circumstances, the same level of physical suffering became psychologically bearable. This isn't superficial positive thinking or self-deception. It's the profound recognition that human beings have a unique capacity to transform unavoidable suffering into achievement through the meaning they ascribe to it. You're probably carrying sufferings in your life right now that you're desperately trying to avoid feeling. Perhaps it's the pain of a relationship that ended, the frustration of a career that doesn't meet your deepest expectations, the anxiety about your purpose in life, the grief for lost opportunities, the existential loneliness that persists even when you're surrounded by people. And your usual response is probably to try not to think about it, to distract yourself, to numb yourself, to wait for it to pass. But Frankl teaches us that this inevitable suffering holds immense transformative potential if you stop running from it and start dialoguing with it, asking what it's trying to show you about how you're living, about what truly matters to you, about changes you need to make. Abandoning the constant flight from unavoidable suffering doesn't mean masochistically seeking pain. It means developing the courage to face the emotional discomfort that's already present, recognizing that some suffering is inherent to the human condition and learning to transform that suffering into growth through the meaning you consciously choose to assign to it. And now I want to pause and really talk to you. I know many of you watching this video are living in constant flight from some suffering or emptiness that seems unbearable to face directly. Perhaps you've developed such automatic strategies of distraction and avoidance that you don't even realize you're running anymore. You just feel that diffuse weight that never really goes away. So tell me here in the comments, what is the emotional or existential discomfort that you most avoid confronting in your life? If it's hard to put into words, simply write, "I am running from my existential void." Nothing more is needed. Your experience matters deeply, and know that by sharing it here, you are doing something incredibly brave. You are acknowledging a truth that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. And more importantly, by doing so in the comments, you create permission for others to also recognize their own flights and voids. Often we feel completely alone in this experience of existential emptiness, thinking we're the only ones struggling with these issues. But when you have the courage to name your experience here, you show dozens of others that they are not alone on this journey. Let's create a community here of people brave enough to stop running and start facing. The third thing, insidiously sabotaging your life, is living on autopilot, following social scripts and external expectations, without a genuine question about whether these paths truly serve your unique sense of purpose. Frankl repeatedly emphasized that each person has a unique vocation, an existential mission only they can fulfill, a specific meaning to be discovered and actualized. But most people never even begin this search because they're too busy trying to fulfill pre-written scripts by others, their parents, their culture, their social circumstances, the expectations of their era. This unexamined conformity to external standards creates a particularly tragic form of existential waste. You might be perfectly executing a life script that simply isn't yours, achieving goals you haven't genuinely chosen, pursuing successes that don't resonate with your deepest self. And the result is a life that functions on the outside but feels strangely false internally, as if you're playing a role in a play written by someone else. Frankl observed that in the concentration camps, where all normal social structures and masks of conformity were brutally stripped away, people were confronted with their naked essence. In that extreme context, there was no room for living by social expectations or maintaining appearances. The only things that mattered were absolutely fundamental questions. Who are you really when everything is taken away? What do you value when there are no external rewards? How do you act when no one is watching or judging? And Frankl saw that some people, when stripped of all social roles and external expectations, revealed extraordinary inner dignity and strength, while others crumbled because they had built their identities entirely around external factors that no longer existed. The crucial lesson is that an authentic life requires you to do the hard work of distinguishing between what you genuinely value and choose versus what you're doing because you feel you should, because it's expected of you, because it's the safer or more socially approved path. This is work our culture makes extraordinarily difficult because it bombards you constantly with messages about how you should live, what you should want, who you should be. And it's far easier to simply accept these messages and follow the ready-made scripts than to do the solitary, sometimes scary work of discovering your own path. You are probably living significant aspects of your life on autopilot right now. Maybe you're in a career you chose because it seemed like the safe or prestigious choice, not because it genuinely expresses who you are and what you want to contribute to the world. Maybe you're in relationships you maintain out of inertia, fear of loneliness, or because it's what's expected, not because these relationships nourish your growth and sense of purpose. Maybe you're pursuing goals that aren't even truly yours, just things you've absorbed from the surrounding culture as markers of success. And the more you live this way, the more distant you become from your authentic self, the deeper the existential void grows. Frankl used to say that the therapist's first task is not to impose values or paths on the patient, but to help them discover the unique meaning only their life can fulfill. This means that abandoning autopilot requires developing a capacity for honest, courageous self-reflection. You need to regularly question, am I doing this because it genuinely resonates with who I am, or because it's what's expected of me? Is this path I'm following leading me to accomplish something I find meaningful, or am I just checking off a list of socially approved successes? When I imagine my life 10, 20 years from now, if I continue in this direction, do I feel a deep satisfaction or a nagging sense of waste? These questions are uncomfortable because they can reveal that you're investing precious time and energy in directions that aren't truly yours. But this discomfort is infinitely preferable to the silent waste of a lifetime lived by someone else's script. Abandoning autopilot doesn't mean rejecting everything conventional or making dramatic, impulsive changes. It means bringing radical awareness to your choices, taking existential responsibility for how you are living, and having the courage to make adjustments, big or small, that align your external life with your internal truths. The fourth thing that's devastatingly sabotaging your life is what Frankl called hyperreflection. This modern tendency to get fixated on your own psychological functioning, constantly monitoring your internal states, exhaustively analyzing your feelings, thoughts, and motivations. Ironically, the more you focus on yourself, the more you lose the capacity to genuinely connect with the world around you and with others. Frankl developed a therapeutic technique called de-reflection specifically to combat this problem. The core idea is that many psychological issues are inadvertently perpetuated and intensified by the excessive attention we give them. If you're struggling with insomnia, for example, and lie in bed fixated on the fact that you can't sleep, anxiously monitoring every passing minute, that very hyper-attention guarantees you won't sleep. The solution isn't to try to sleep harder, but to stop thinking about sleeping and redirect your attention elsewhere. The same principle applies to a vast range of psychological and existential problems. Are you having trouble with social connections, becoming intensely focused on how you're performing socially, monitoring every word you say, obsessively analyzing how others might be perceiving you? Practically guarantees you'll become even more awkward and disconnected. The solution is self-transcendence, temporarily forgetting yourself and genuinely engaging with the other person, the conversation, the moment. This is one of the specifically human capacities Frankl valued most, our ability to temporarily forget ourselves and turn towards something or someone outside of us. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that the people who survived better psychologically weren't those constantly focused on their own suffering, analyzing their feelings, ruminating on their situation. They were the ones who managed, even in those horrific circumstances, to temporarily forget themselves by focusing on helping another prisoner, mentally planning a future project, or simply observing a sunset through the bars. This capacity for self-transcendence, for temporarily stepping outside of yourself, was literally a matter of psychological survival. Our contemporary culture, however, promotes the exact opposite. We're encouraged to be constantly in touch with our feelings, to analyze our traumas, to process every experience through the filter of how it affects us emotionally. There's value in a certain level of self-awareness and emotional processing, but our culture has taken this to pathological extremes. The result is a generation of people hyper-focused on themselves, constantly monitoring and dissecting their own inner workings, yet paradoxically less and less able to genuinely connect with anything beyond themselves. You've probably experienced this, moments when you were so worried about yourself, so focused on how you were feeling, how you were being perceived, on processing your emotions, that you completely lost the ability to be present in the moment, to connect with another person, to get absorbed in a meaningful activity. And the more you focused on yourself, the worse you felt, creating a vicious cycle of hyper-reflection and suffering. On the other hand, you've likely also had moments when you were so absorbed in something you found important, so genuinely interested in someone else, so focused on creating or contributing something, that you completely forgot about yourself. And in retrospect, you realize those were probably your moments of greatest satisfaction and least psychological suffering. Frankl used to say that self-actualization cannot be pursued directly. It only occurs as a side effect of self-transcendence. When you stop obsessively focusing on yourself and dedicate yourself to something you deem meaningful outside of you, you paradoxically become more whole, more fulfilled, more yourself. Abandoning hyper-reflection doesn't mean ignoring your feelings or avoiding necessary self-awareness. It means recognizing that you are not just an object of psychological analysis for yourself, but a subject who can actively and intentionally engage with the world. It means developing the ability to temporarily forget yourself and lose yourself in something that matters, knowing that this healthy self-forgetting is actually the most direct path to your own flourishing. If these ideas are resonating deeply with you, if you feel like you finally found someone who understands this search for genuine meaning beyond contemporary superficiality, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore the thought of Frankl and other humanist philosophers weekly, offering real, profound answers to the existential emptiness so many of us carry in silence. You don't have to walk this journey of self-discovery and meaning-making alone. This channel exists to create a safe space where we can explore these fundamental questions of human existence with the seriousness and depth they deserve. Hit that subscribe button and become part of this community of people brave enough to question, to seek, and to grow beyond the superficial scripts our culture offers. The fifth and final thing that's profoundly sabotaging your life is the refusal to take full existential responsibility for your existence. Frankl was absolutely unwavering on this point. Every single person is inescapably responsible for how they respond to the circumstances of their life, and this responsibility cannot be outsourced, delegated, or avoided without a devastating existential cost. Even in the concentration camps where people literally had no control over almost anything in their lives, Frankl insisted that one fundamental freedom still remained: the freedom to choose one's attitude in the face of those circumstances. He observed that under the same objective conditions of extreme suffering, some people behaved like angels, while others devolved into something akin to animals. The difference wasn't in the external circumstances, which were equally horrific for everyone, but in the internal choices each person made about how to respond to those circumstances. This insistence on existential responsibility might sound harsh, especially in a culture that often encourages victimhood and externalizing blame. It's psychologically far more comfortable to attribute our problems to outside forces, our childhood, other people, circumstances, society. There's a temporary relief in saying you're not responsible. It's not your fault. You're where you are because of factors beyond your control. But that temporary relief comes with a catastrophic existential price. By denying your responsibility, you also deny your power. If you're not responsible for your situation, then you also have no real power to change it. You become a passive victim of external forces, waiting for something or someone to come rescue you. Frankl saw this refusal of responsibility as a primary cause of modern neuroses and existential emptiness. When you don't take responsibility for your life, you inadvertently abdicate your power to create meaning in your existence. You become beholden to external circumstances to dictate the meaning and value of your life, and inevitably those circumstances will never be exactly what you want them to be. There will always be challenges, limitations, injustices, suffering that you didn't choose and don't control. The fundamental existential question isn't whether you will face difficult circumstances. The certainty is that you will, but rather how you will choose to respond to them. Frankl tells a powerful story from his days in the camps. There was a fellow inmate who was utterly broken, saying there was nothing left to hope for in life, that everything was lost. Frankl turned the question back on him. It is not what you still expect from life, but what life expects from you. Life is constantly asking questions of you through every situation you face, and you need to answer not with words or reflections, but with actions and the right behavior. This shift in perspective is revolutionary. Instead of passively questioning what life should be giving you, you begin to recognize that life is constantly questioning you, challenging you, expecting you to respond with responsibility and meaning. You are probably avoiding taking full responsibility for some significant aspects of your life right now. Maybe you're blaming your circumstances for not being where you'd like to be. Maybe you're waiting for something external to change so you can finally live authentically. Maybe you're hiding behind psychological diagnoses, past traumas, or real limitations that you've turned into complete excuses for inaction. And this refusal of responsibility, however psychologically understandable, is keeping you stuck. Because as long as you don't take full responsibility, you can't exercise real power. Taking full existential responsibility doesn't mean denying that you've faced real injustices, traumas, or limitations. It means recognizing that despite all of that, you still have fundamental choices about how you're going to respond, what meaning you're going to assign to your experiences, what direction you're going to take from here. This responsibility might feel like a heavy burden, and in some ways it is, but it is also your greatest freedom and your greatest power. If you take just one thing away from this, let it be this. Stop waiting for external circumstances to perfectly align before you finally start living a meaningful life. Life is questioning you. now, through your current circumstances, whatever they may be. And your response to those questions, the choices you make about how to live in spite of limitations and challenges, is where your power to create a meaningful existence resides. Frankl proved in the most extreme crucible of human suffering that this power exists, that this fundamental freedom cannot be taken from you as long as you are conscious. He demonstrated that even when everything is stripped away from a person except bare life itself, the most important freedom remains. The freedom to choose your attitude, your behavior, the meaning you assign to your experience. These 5 things we're exploring: the relentless chase for instant happiness, the constant sidestepping of unavoidable suffering, living on autopilot by external scripts, the overthinking that traps you in your own head, and the refusal to take full existential responsibility. These are deep, yet subtle saboteurs. They're accepted, even encouraged, by contemporary culture, making them incredibly hard to spot and ditch. But each one systematically pulls you away from the possibility of a genuinely meaningful life. And the profound message from Viktor Frankl, tested and proven in the most extreme circumstances of human suffering, is that a life of deep meaning isn't reserved for special people in privileged situations. It's a possibility open to every single person, no matter their circumstances, however challenging. What determines if you'll realize this possibility isn't your external situation, but your internal choices about how you respond to those circumstances, what you commit yourself to, what attitude you adopt, and the responsibility you claim for your own existence. Letting go of these 5 things won't happen overnight. It requires constant vigilance, courageous self-questioning, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about how you're living. But every small step in that direction brings you closer to an existential authenticity that our culture makes increasingly rare, yet which remains the deepest human need. So I'll leave you with this question for honest reflection. If you continued living exactly as you are for the next 5, 10, 20 years, would you look back at the end of your life with a deep satisfaction of having lived authentically, of having found and fulfilled your unique meaning, or with the crushing regret of having squandered the precious gift of existence by following scripts that were never truly yours? This question isn't rhetorical. It's the most important existential question you can ask yourself, and only you can answer it, not with words, but with the choices you'll make from here on out about how to live. If this video sparked something in you, share in the comments which of these 5 things resonates most with your experience, or tell us about a time you had to take existential responsibility in a tough situation. Your experience might inspire others on this journey of self-discovery and the pursuit of authenticity, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now to keep exploring with us these deep dimensions of human existence that Frankl dedicated his life to understanding and teaching.